Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Energy Markets podcast. It is March 19th, and we have Brent crude oil trading at $86.67, down very slightly this morning in early Asian trade. Let's kick off with Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert. Narendra, are people in India getting a little bit nervous as this oil price climbs up towards $90 of Brent?
Yes, to be honest, I mean, there is a bit of anxiety because higher crude oil prices are not, good for India's economy, especially when the economy is doing so well. And all across, you see very positive sentiments, and the perception overall is that India's economy is headed for, massive growth in the coming years. So when you get a news, the kind of news that we get, then we of course get very anxious, but we, all the same time, we wonder why oil prices are going up, because we don't see any kind of upside on the demand side, and we also don't see any major disruption in terms of supply. So then why the prices are going up? I mean, we know that exports from Saudi Arabia and Iraq the last few weeks have gone down a bit as part of a design, as part of a strategy. But even that is, for instance, factored in. We don't really see much reason. We have also seen reports from Iran that Iran is going to boost, oil production. Of course, it's not going to for domestic market alone. It's going to be, they also have, exports on their radar. So it's a bit confusing picture, but my own sense is that $85, $86, given the kind of ground realities in terms of demand and supply, and the fact there are no major geopolitical disruption. So I think it's not very sustainable. It has been artificially pushed up by some players within OPEC, and maybe there's some players from outside OPEC. And unless there is a kind of some major development in terms of growth in demand, I don't really see the prices at $85, $86 are very sustainable. If they do it artificially, then the major consumers and major producers like the United States would need to step in, and they will definitely step in. But I don't really see, I'm talking the limited horizon, the next 2, 3 months. I see absolutely no reason for oil prices to be anywhere more than, let's say, in the region of $80 per barrel. I'm talking, of course, Brent.
Mark Oswald, Chief Economist and Global Strategist at ADM Investor Services International. Perhaps you could explain to Narendra what your thoughts, why this oil price, is this the breakout that we've kind of been waiting for as we sort of knock on the doorstep of the second quarter?
Well, I think basically things have turned out to be slightly better in demand terms when we're looking around the world. It's reassuring that China is still actually importing quite a lot, though not at the same sort of level as last year. Europe hasn't really fallen off the cliff that a lot of people expected it to. And in the US, things are basically holding up. But I agree with Narendra actually to a large extent, because we've still got so much available supply to bring back on stream that at any moment where it threatens to become disorderly on the upside, we can bring the extra supply, and we're still growing that non-OPEC supply at a very, very rapid rate. I think the only interesting thing which has happened recently really is the closing of the gap between OPEC, which always seemed very overly optimistic and people were skeptical about, and the IEA shifting to acknowledging the fact that demand is a little bit better. But that little bit better is the important part here. We're not talking about something which is a real game changer for oil in the medium term.
Yiyong He, founder and CEO of LNG Easy in Singapore. Yiyong, is LNG easy on the taste buds in Asia now? Maybe it's softening the blow of the climbing oil prices, the collapsing gas and LNG price. Everybody in Asia must be doing a dance.
Yes, I mean we see that there's some buying picking up here and there as LNG price come closer or even lower than domestic gas price in some countries like Vietnam. But I think the real growth area would be in the retail LNG side, where the LNG is trucked to the customers at the final consumption point. where the competition is with the derivatives of crude, LPG, HFO, diesel, gasoline, and so on. I think, that's a real opening there. LNG is now cheaper than LPG on a heat value basis. So I think, there would be a lot of growth for LNG going forward.
Narendra, despite the rising price on Brent, of course, India enjoyed last year a lot of discounted Russian Urals. What's the outlook this year? Are you not benefiting from the same thing?
Well, you see, for India, the policy is very clear. It's not nothing to do with any love for any geography, including Russia. It's all about economics. So as long as Russian exporters can deliver oil at our ports, which means that they take care of shipping and insurance too, together with, of course, discounted price, Russian oil will continue to flow into India. But if there are challenges in terms of shipping, then they have to find a solution. We have a very limited shipping tonnage. 92% of our oil is imported using foreign ships. And Russia also has a very small fleet of its own. They have been basically depending on what is known as a kind of, the dark fleet or the gray fleet, all kind of names. But many of those ships were actually Western ships, tankers, some of them very old tankers. So that's something for Russia to deal with. If they can find a solution and they can deliver oil at our ports, at our refineries, and continue to offer attractive discounts, we will continue to buy, Russian oil. As he said, that we have nothing to do with the nationality of the color of oil. It's all about economics. And so far, it seems that they're trying. Russia is trying. And so our refiners are in touch with them. But at the same time, if we get better offers and more attractive discount from other markets, or at least better terms, let's say from the United States, or or from Brazil, or for that matter, Saudi Arabia and UAE and all that, we very happily go for that. But and we are also keeping very close eye on Iran. Recently, we have bought a few cargoes from Iran. We know there are sanctions, so they have been not bought directly; they've been bought indirectly. But and also this way, our refiners have also tested what happens if you bring in Iranian oil from a third party, but Iranian oil nevertheless. So is the US going to object or no? We don't know yet. But the fact is that if Iranian oil is also available at discounted rates or at least attractive rates, there are many refiners, not only India, many refiners are going to look at the Iranian oil.
Well, certainly the Chinese are looking and taking that Iranian oil in nearly exclusive quantities. But just coming back to the Russian oil, the somewhat unusual story last week where the U.S. energy envoy Amos Hochstein was quoted as saying that he's trying to help India negotiate lower prices for Russian oil by deepening the sanctions on the tankers. Your thoughts on that comment, and does a tightening sanctioning of the tanker market help India? And do you welcome this US support?
Well, the fact is that, we are buying Russian crude oil, refining and exporting to 106 markets around the world, including the US. And so there's Russian oil going to the US via Indian refinings. But as I said, once it's refined, it has no nationality. It is a kind of global nationality. So, but at the same time, I think for the US and the Biden administration in particular, in this election year, I think their priority is to make sure that oil prices remain low. If the oil prices are very high, Biden might lose elections. Everybody knows that. So I think at this stage, my sense is the US priority is to make sure that, there are no supply disruptions and oil prices are kept within limits. And that's not possible unless you let Russian oil flow into market, or for instance, Iran's oil also to start flowing into market. Because beyond a point, OPEC is not going to listen. We have seen that. So in order to check their counterbalance that you need Russian oil, maybe you need even Iranian oil, and India being the third largest consumer. We are roughly consuming 5.4 million barrels of oil. And this is only growing, demand is only growing. So I think given all those facts, the US may also not want oil prices to go beyond a limit. So US has a domestic political agenda to make sure oil prices are kept low. India has a similar agenda. And at the same time, no, neither India nor China nor the United States, they want any disruption in terms of supply. So given all that, put that all into the basket. So when the US envoy says what he has said, it's very easy to understand. When Russia says they want you to continue to kind of, play an important role in global supply, it's very understandable. When India buys Russian oil, for that matter, from any geography, I mean, which is understandable. So for economy like India, we need oil at attractive rates. We don't look at the nationality tomorrow. If any other
But
geography,
you welcome the Americans' assistance to lower the price, whatever their sanctions can do to tighten, to help bring that price down. India welcomes that.
Who won't?
Of course, who won't? Mark, I wanted to get the sense of China certainly not waiting around and maybe benefiting from if India is reluctant to take some of this Russian oil. The Chinese seem more than willing to continue to swallow as much as nearly 2 million barrels a day. Your outlook for Russia to continue to get its oil to market, and particularly to China?
Well, I think China is absolutely critical to this big switch from west to east in terms of the direction of Russian oil supplies, and it will continue to be. At the end of the day, as Narendra said, the world needs Russian oil. That's the fact of the matter. We don't want the world, things to tighten that much. And the Chinese economy is, we bemoan it, and certainly yesterday's data that we had was disappointing, but it's actually still firing on a lot of cylinders. And if you look at the problems they've got with coal, because they're trying to up coal output domestically, and yet it's dropped 5%. They are going to need as much oil basically as a fallback for the power sector. And that shouldn't be neglected. And that should also help to prop up gas demand to a certain extent. I mean, there is clearly a huge gas glut in the world, above all in Europe. Where you've seen a lot of demand destruction. So yes, Russia will continue to basically concentrate a lot on China, and China for the time being will continue to be more than a willing buyer.
Young, China's ability to sort of keep its economy propped up. I mean, they haven't done any big bazooka stimulus, but they've done bits and pieces. How about the reasons China's been able to keep its electricity tariff below 10 US cents per kilowatt hour? How is it sustaining that at these prices?
Well, because they are getting more than 50% from coal, right? And coal is, around about 2.5 US dollar per MMBTU in heat value equivalent. So, there's still money to be made, at these levels. I mean, international LNG is, let's say, $9 if you put in $1 for terminal use, and then another $1 for taxes. So, I mean, they would have a break even of 12 cents or something like that if they use LNG for power generation, which is above what they have. But then they had a lot of other cheap stuff, right? They had hydro, they had wind, they had solar, and so on. I think but when it comes to China, I would think that, I would kind of disagree with most conventional view there, because the conventional wisdom is that China is going to switch from coal to LNG, for peak shaving and as flexible power to firm and balance renewable. I think, the transition is going to be directly from coal to renewable instead of wired gas. So, China will continue to, import LNG at a healthy rate, maybe high single digits, 8%, 7% growth. But, the question is really the demand growth in, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and so on, Vietnam, Philippines, whether this growth will be sufficient to offset the decline in Europe and Japan and Korea. That's the kind of a big question, right? Because
they offset the demand for what? Coal?
Oh, for LNG, I mean.
LNG, right. Narendra, just picking up on that point, India amongst Pakistan and Bangladesh, your neighbors, were published today, the world's 3 smoggiest countries. Transition is something you've really got to get much more accelerated. Your thoughts on the report, which indicated 15 times the level recommended by the World Health Organization. While you want energy as cheap as possible, you've got to at some point think about a much greater accelerated transition. Your thoughts on that?
Well, first, very quickly, Mark's point, I just want to say that when I said the world needs Russian oil, I means if Russian oil disappears from the global supply system, the prices will go up. And therefore, the world needs Russian oil to keep the prices, within limits. That's what I meant. And for price-sensitive markets like India, Russian oil presence in the global supply system is important because that checks the price. So that was my point. Coming to this thing, you see, energy transition, there is no one silver bullet, for instance, that may work for Norway or Germany and for all countries in the world. Our ground realities are different. I remember, cities in Europe, remember in the 70s, 80s and all that, about in terms of the pollution and everything. So in countries like India, and the same goes for many other countries in our part of the world, we, of course, transition is like, is going to be transition with Indian characteristics or with Asian characteristics, in the sense that, we can't go for a complete switch. That's just not possible. You can't compromise with growth. We need
but
jobs.
can you then correspondingly afford the health bills of the 15 times the level of World Health Organization? I mean, you might be getting discounted energy prices with coal, but you're going to pay it back on the healthcare side.
Well, that's a very good question and very easy to answer. You see, the point is that, you have to kind of strike the right balance. In India, we call it the middle path. That's Buddha's path. In the sense that you can't come say, all right, we're going to take care of your health. Let's go back to caves. Let's go back to the Himalayas and meditate there and eat grass or leaves and all that. But then it's going to be so green that even, we'll put countries like Norway and Switzerland to shame. Is that the option? Though that's not the option. So we need growth. At the same time, we take, to take care of the health of the people. So if you look at, for instance, the average lifespan in India is growing, average income is growing, average, economic growth is everybody there to see. Now, the point is that, yes, I understand that, all right, if we go green, then we will be able to, and you stop the infrastructure building, stop construction, stop this, and then, of course, we'll
But I mean, there's a middle ground, isn't there? You don't need to be eating grass and stopping everything, but ultimately getting down, accelerating the transition away from.
If you have any country which has already done that, please send me the name of that country. I'll take the next available flight, learn it from there, recommend to my government in India to do it. There is no such case on the planet. I don't know about other planets. Now, the question is, it's very easy for people to sit in comforts of London and Paris and come out with such reports, which very often they do IEAs of the world or, others of the world and all that. But come to countries like India, where you have unemployment problem, you have large population, and you have geopolitical threats from all sides, north, south, east, west, everywhere, and yet you have to grow. So now how do you do that? And your energy deficit, 88% of your requirement oil you import, 56% of your requirement of gas you import, uranium you import, 90% solar power equipment you import. What do you do? Now, that's why I say, let these people who lecture, I'll pay their bills, let them come to Delhi, show me the solution. Or give me an example of one country where they've already done it. So point is, what India is doing India's record in terms of renewable energy is better than most developed countries. Most countries in Europe, India's renewable targets and what we have been able to do.
I mean, ultimately, I don't think it's a lecture. It's just a recommendation. I mean, you're the one that's going to have to pay the health bills.
Well,
Mark,
you see, just one line. Allow me one line. The point is that, in terms of intellect and wisdom, we can export it to any country. We have so much of that. We don't need lectures. We call in our language Gyan. What we need, if you have technology, you have capital, let's collaborate and help find a solution in India. If you don't do that, we know how to solve our problems.
Absolutely. Mark, sitting in the comfort of London, which I'm not sure is looking comfortable these days, but nonetheless, your thoughts on the elevated oil price and how much of it is it a breakout, or is this just a week in which we've got elevated geopolitical risks giving us some oxygen, Putin's re-election, the attacks on the refineries, the ongoing uncertainty in the Red Sea. These are the extra few dollars, and all will return to normal once this sort of week passes. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think this is an additional risk premium because some of those risks, which we've been actually quite dismissive of over the last 6 months, in geopolitical terms, particularly the disruption in the Red Sea, the attacks on the Russian oil refinery, they are being taken a little bit more seriously. But it is, to me, a temporary risk premium. I don't, there isn't the other side, because the other side of the coin would have to be a much better global economic outlook, and that's simply not there. It's too patchy. So it is a temporary one. I don't think, on the other hand, that we're going to see any change in messaging from OPEC Plus. But for the time being, it is the market's just factoring in that slightly bit more. You're seeing it actually in broad terms across commodity markets. Commodity markets have been beaten up in most cases, bar things like cocoa. The bulk of them, grains have got record shorts in them. They've been beaten up very heavily, and people are looking at the global economic outlook and saying it's not as bad as we thought. So it's a small adjustment, but I don't really think we're in a situation where we're going to really go and test 90 in a meaningful way.
Let's go to the survey question, which is exactly on that point. Brent crude oil will continue to rise to $90 before the end of Q1. We're on a roll. It's heading up. That's the thesis of this statement today. Agree or disagree? At the end of the day, oil prices have been, although they were what appeared to be stuck in a kind of a bandwidth for a few weeks, but since January the 1st, when we were trading Brent at $76 a barrel, we're up $10+ now, and that's been a relatively continuous rise. Will that continue to hit 90 in the next 2 weeks ahead of the end of the quarter? Yong-Hae, in terms of Asia's outlook and the beyond India, of course, Southeast Asia, the fast-growing economies of Vietnam and Indonesia just had an election. The outlook there for the continued sort of elevated oil price, the strong dollar, will that curtail demand, energy demand in Southeast Asia, in China this year, or are these prices manageable to keep at least 2023 levels?
Well, I'm not an expert on crude, so I don't really know. But I think on the general economic
But on the macroeconomic health of the region,
I think China
absorb it.
Well, China is going. The first January, February industrial production figures are good, and I think there's enough of in a way strangling of the negative sentiment in China. So people are getting out of it. Their production is amazingly productive. So a lot of more exports. Trade surpluses is building again. So in ASEAN, where Indonesia is part of, I mean, we can see.
Of course, and Singapore is a bellwether, right? You sit and service all of it. If you're doing well, then it's a reflection that everywhere is doing well.
Yeah, I think we'll do well. ASEAN will do well. I mean, Bangladesh will go back on its feet. I think after there was some disruption following the general election, but now they would on the way to up again. I think Pakistan it needs some political stability, but when stability is there, I think there's a genuine need to grow everything. It's 300 million people. India is doing really well, so I think in general, I think we can be fairly, I mean, cautiously optimistic, I think.
As Mark mentioned, everybody's looking a little better than expected. Narendra, better than expected 1 month exactly, the April 19th, India's elections kick off, the biggest democratic process in the world, over 4 weeks, starting on April 19th. As we run into the election, your outlook, your expectations for what it may deliver and what its impact will have on the continued excellent performance of India?
Well, good question. And you see, I've been traveling. I returned just yesterday. I've been traveling in central parts of India and interacting with the people on the ground, the ordinary people who are the most important voters. And so the impression one gets is that, Prime Minister Modi is going to return for the third time, which means that will be the, BJP 3.0. And they have already made a lot of promises, and they are also reminding the people all the promises they made 5 years ago have been delivered. And now they are making new promises. And one of the major promises is that they are going to make India a developed country by 2047. That's when India becomes, will be celebrating 100 years of independence from Britain. So, and that's the major message across. And for that means that 2047 is the goal, and then they are working.
And would Narendra Modi expect to be still in power by then? Is that
well,
the plan?
it's about the country. It's about the country. You see, the point is that, when you make a plan that to make India a developed country by 2047, it's just like China has a plan for 2049. Read,
Yeah.
There are a lot of literature available on that. Whether
Sure.
Xi Jinping is there or not, it's not about that. It's about the country. So you see, for emerging economies, developing countries to have such goals is a fantastic thing. I mean,
Absolutely.
people in the developed who have developed already, they can't understand it. They can laugh at it. They can't understand. They developed because they exploited countries like India. That's a different story. But the point here I'm making is that, the others can laugh, but for us, India, that means you're talking of a big dream. And people are asking for milestones. So the government is talking about milestones. And so therefore, my sense is the government, BJP, will return to power, maybe with the same kind of majority or maybe slightly bigger. We don't know. That's difficult to say at this stage.
What does a bigger majority deliver for the Narendra Modi government?
Well, that means that's a good question. If you get a bigger majority, that means you'll be able to push ahead with further reforms in 3 key areas. Disinvestment, that is the privatization of state enterprises, because there's so many of them. As you know, they play a very big role in India's economy. So they have been trying to privatize, but there have been kind of China walls and roadblocks. So a bigger majority, they'll be able to do it faster. Number 2, the massive and most important reforms in the agriculture sector. They tried and they didn't succeed. They actually had to take the bills out of parliament. So they would like to probably rework on it and go for the agriculture reform. 3, reforms in the conventional oil and gas sector. In India, oil and gas sector is still largely controlled by the state. So maybe that to bring in more foreign players, or maybe to bring in a domestic player, or maybe privatize a couple of the major companies, especially in the downstream sector, maybe one of them even in the upstream sector. So there are many such sectors. So I think post this, June, when the new government is installed in power, you're going to see the next 2 years massive reforms. And that will basically make India even further attractive destination for those who have got capital or technology, or those looking for collaborations in different areas, right from artificial intelligence to oil and gas to LNG, and you name it, it will be required there. So from 2024 to 2027, you're going to see India massive reforms, and for that they need this majority. If they get it, you're going to see massive reforms practically in all key sectors, and I said most particularly in areas like energy, conventional energy, and agriculture.
It's certainly going to be good timing for India, because there's a lot of FDI shying away from China at the moment. Yong Hei, last word. You wanted to jump in there to comment.
Comment on.
I thought you wanted to jump in on Narendra's comments there.
Exactly. Sorry, I was just.
You can remember that far back.
No. I do, but. I was trying to say that, how many years Lee Kuan Yew had been in power, as a prime minister, and then as a senior minister, and then a minister mentor. So I think, I'm all for long-term stability, political wise. And if you look at the successful countries in the, since the Second World War, they have been Japan, the 4 Asian dragons, China, now, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and all that. All these countries are politically have been stable, for a reason. So it's very important, and I really fully support that. Political stability prerequisite for economic development. That's what I'm trying to say to.
Well, certainly in the case of India, where it's also democratic stability in the terms of performance rewarded, you'd have to give that an extra tick in the box. Most of the people in this room disagree with my thesis. Nonetheless, that's okay. There will be no $90 before the end of the March. Narendra can sleep easy. But I will post on social media and see if the wider circle agree. Narendra Taneja, as always, awesome to have you joining us from India, giving us the insights from the ground there. Mark Oswald, as always, thank you so much for joining us from London. And Yi-Young He from Singapore, really appreciate it. We're here every morning at 10:30 UAE time. All the best. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yes.